Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I am Ryan Wormeli, joined on this Thursday morning by Andrew Erickson and by Derek Brown. Fellas, we are here. It is week 11. We were just talking before the show. I feel like we talk about this every single week, but how fast the NFL season goes. It's already Thanksgiving next week. It's already week 11. We are deep into the season. Tonight is Thursday Night Football. You notice me rocking the Ravens gear. It's Ravens-Bengals, best Thursday night game of the season. So we'll see how that one goes for me and all Ravens fans and for fantasy managers as well. But in the meantime, we will talk about some Week 11 must-sit players. And guys, we will start where we always do with the must-sit running backs. Erickson, who you got number one?
I'm going to sit Najee Harris because he's the number 2 running back on the Pittsburgh Steelers at this point. We saw Jaylen Warren have his best game of his career that Derek Brown projected on one of the shows last week.
100 rushing yards, baby. You love to see it. Nobody believes.
And still had Jerome Ford ranked higher.
Yeah, and somehow Jerome Ford also had a good game and ranked higher for DBro.
I was waiting for it.
But, last week aside, Warren played 51% of the snaps. That was his season high. He was the same as Najee Harris, so both guys were still playing. But it's just so clear that Warren is the superior running back. Mike Tomlin talked about Jaylen Warren earning the start in the game last week. And I just want to ride with the hot hand. And that is clearly Jaylen Warren here. So I think in certain matchups, Najee is still someone that you can play when it's a favorable matchup on the ground. But if you are the inferior running back and you're more touchdown dependent, which he's kind of been in a brutal matchup against the Cleveland Browns, who, yes, their defense has been beaten at some points, but it's been mostly when they've been playing on the road. Like when they've played at home, it's just been an absolute nightmare for every single offense that they have faced. The game total for this game is comical because it keeps going down every single time I check. And I went at like 38, and I was like 32 and a half, which that may be the lowest total I've ever seen in an NFL football game.
It's like one of the Iowa college totals that Thor tweets about every week, how they keep setting records.
Yes. So if you're betting on Najee, he'll probably score a touchdown. Like this is like the worst bet to make that type of touchdown bet with Najee, because I just don't think there's going to be a lot of points scored in this game overall. So for me, especially with Warren out carrying Najee in the second half, 9-5, I would just try to get away from Najee Harris.
The one thing I'll say on the Steelers scoring, and I think you make a lot of good points, is the last time we saw DTR start against the Ravens, mind you, so a better team than the Steelers, but the Steelers do have a good defense. They gave them a lot of short fields in that first start by DTR. Do you expect him to be better and maybe not put them in that position this week?
Well, as a reminder with that too, DTR knew that he was going to start 2.5 hours before the game started.
That's fair.
So he really had no shot at all to be prepared. Like they're preparing him to be the starting quarterback this week. Like they've already announced it. They announced it right when Deshaun Watson was going to be out for the season. They're like, we're going to roll with DTR, which makes sense. He's way more upside than PJ Walker does. So I think DTR will be in a much better spot, especially where he's going to be prepared to be the starter. And I think that we shouldn't forget how good he looked in the preseason. Like he looked really good. He's a guy that had a lot of reps at UCLA. He can run. He's mobile. And so I think he's going to be much better than we saw him against the Ravens, who again, Ravens have one of the best defenses in the NFL, and they've basically made every quarterback look pretty bad. So I wouldn't hold that against DTR.
Deep.
Erickson just pandering to the host, just setting the host up here.
I mean, he's not really going out on a limb by saying the Ravens defense has made a lot of teams look silly, except for Deshaun last week, which I'll admit he looked really great. DBro, who you got for your first must sit?
It's going to be Chuba Hubbard, guys. I think this backfield is slowly just becoming a mess. I mean, Hubbard played 50% of the snaps last week and had 11 touches, and that was his lowest snap count since week 5. So Miles Sanders kind of getting involved. And second of all, can we just call this what it is? This is not a fruitful backfield. This is not an offense we want to buy into. And the matchup is grotesque. It is horrible. Since week 5, Dallas's run defense, second lowest explosive run rate, 11th lowest missed tackle rate. Chuba Hubbard is going to be skating uphill the entire day. So I want no part of Chuba.
Yeah, I think this is a great call. I don't even really have any follow-up questions. He's ranked as like a mid to late RB3. I think that's fine, just given the other names out there. But if I can avoid starting him, I most certainly will be doing that. I have no interest in getting Chuba Hubbard into any lineups. So let's move to Erickson, your next must-sit running back.
I'm going to try to sit James Cook. I don't know what we're going to expect to see from this Bills offense in terms of a new play caller taking over. Look, James Cook, we got like the total experience from him on Monday Night Football. He looked explosive. He was fumbling. He got benched. He came back in the game. Didn't get red zone touches. Like, it was like all James Cook you could offer in one game. And the thing that saved us was he got the explosive run, which almost didn't happen because he fumbled the ball and then it bounced right back into his lap mid stride, and he was able to rip off, a 40-yard rush. But besides that, like, he didn't score and, involved in the passing game to a minimum. So is Leonard Fournette going to be active in this next game? Potentially, So for me, again, the Jets have been a defense that's been able to be beat on the road, against the run recently, but I'm just overall concerned that if James Cook doesn't get the volume, he's just going to kill you, like, in your lineup. I don't see a ton of upside. Again, it's not a matchup that I love against the Jets overall for the Bills offense. Even though the Bills offense is good, should be good, it's just finding ways to, like, not be good and not be productive for fantasy football. So James Cook, I would just try to shy away from. And it's not like he's in a position where, I'm going to bench James Cook and he's going to, like, blow up on my bench. He doesn't do that. Like, it's really hard to do that when the only way he does that is if he rips off massive runs for touchdowns, which, again, we got the massive run last week. Wouldn't bet on it happening again.
DBro, where do you have Cook this week?
I've got him in low end RB2 range. I mean, that's about, I think you can make a case for him anywhere from low end RB2 to high end RB3, depending on who you're higher on in that range. And Erickson's points are not wrong. I'm going to bring up a side tangent here. Can we do away with the entire NFL coaches saying, okay, to teach you a lesson for fumbling the ball, we're going to put you on the bench? It's James Cook's first 2 fumbles of the season. No, he's an NFL player. He didn't know until you put him on the bench that fumbling was bad. I'm so glad that NFL coaches do that, because without that type of tutelage, they'd never know that fumbling was ever bad.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like, it's one thing if it's like a guy just has like butterfingers and cannot hold of the ball. It's like, I just don't trust him. But the whole, like, you need to learn a lesson is so
Gibson,
silly.
10 fumbles in a game? Like, okay, fine, whatever.
Yeah.
But that's his first 2 of the season? Come on.
Yeah,
guys.
that's ridiculous. And yet it continues to happen year after year with coaches literally putting themselves behind the 8 ball, setting their best running back for a reason that the running back knows can't happen again. But we can move on from that.
What's the double standard, man? Because I put it out on social media and I'm like, are we going to have that same kind of energy when Josh Allen fumbles or throws an interception?
Josh Allen did fumble.
Okay, never mind.
One of those was Josh Allen's fault on the exchange where he dropped it early. And
not per social media. That was James Cook again.
Yeah. All right, Deaver, sticking with you. Next must sit running back.
Oh, it's got to be Darrell Henderson, guys. And again, talking about backfields that are just, that's the Rams. It's the Rams in a nutshell. Darrell Henderson has led the backfield in snaps in 2 of the 3 weeks. He's garnered 15 touches per game. But you look at all the parts of pizzas. One, Darrell Henderson has not been explosive. He's been outside the top 30 in explosive run rate, in yards after contact per attempt. But also, and I know I'm going to sound like I'm cherry picking here, but up until the Baltimore Ravens there's too much Ravens talk in this episode. I got to stop that. But anyway.
No such thing.
Up until the Baltimore Ravens steamrolled that run defense, Seattle Seahawks had a really good run defense, man. You look at the previous 5 games, 12th lowest missed tackle rate, 8th lowest rushing touchdown rate. So I know it sounds like I'm cherry picking, but up until that, we're talking about the Seahawks as a top 12 run defense. Just because one team absolutely demolished them, I don't think we need to just throw it in the tank and say, okay, well, now they're bad. Now I need to worry about firing up Darrell Henderson. He's staying on the bench this week.
Yeah, Henderson's RB 29 in the rankings this week, according to the experts, in half PPR. Is that too high, too low, or just right, D-Bro? I think it's probably about right, but it's still not a guy I feel good about.
Right. It's about right. I mean, I think this is a bigger conversation about once you get past RB 16, 17, we're all just, who do I rank next? So,
yeah, I think that's fair. Let's move to your next one, Erickson, your third and final must-sit running back.
Antonio Gibson. For me, I know that Gibson's been getting steamed up a little bit. He's been more involved in the passing game. He has 5+ catches, 5+ targets in 3 straight games, as the Commanders just drop back to throw every single time that they can. And it's a good matchup against the Giants on paper. Their defense has not been great against the run, but Antonio Gibson popped up the injury report with a toe injury. And historically speaking, Antonio Gibson is not someone you want to play or touch when he's injured in any capacity. So, yes, I'm diving a little bit deeper here. But if you're on a bye week, you picked up Gibson. Again, I think that on paper, it looks like a really good matchup. But we did see the Giants shut down this Commanders offense a couple weeks ago. There's a potential for that to happen. Again, another game with a very low total at 37 points. So Antonio Gibson for me is someone that, again, unless we get a full practice at some point, he's probably someone not trying to flex in as someone with a good matchup on paper.
You said you're kind of going lower down. He's still an RB3 according to the experts. So I think it's a totally valid name to pick and to point out that if you can go another direction, you probably should, because I think, again, given we're still in bye season, given the injuries the position has seen, that there will be people out there who are planning to start Gibson. I have to start him in our work 14 team league, which is just a lack of other options. But I think there are people who will have to make that decision. DBro, where are you at on Gibson this week?
I've got him as an RB4, and I'll toss this to you, Erickson. This might be a layup, but I'm curious your thoughts here. If Antonio Gibson, if the pinky toe is good and he plays, would you play Antonio Gibson or Rico Dowdle? I think it's a slam dunk Dowdle, but your thoughts?
So I really like the Panthers actually in this Dallas game to not necessarily come away with like an upset, but I mean, I've seen Dallas go on the road as a double-digit favorite and lose. We saw that this year against Arizona Cardinals. So if anyone's going to do it, we're not surprised if Dallas does it. So I'm not buying into this Rico Dowdle like he's taking over for Tony Pollard. I get the play. Like, I understand like they're big favorites.
So you're investing in the pinky toe. You're investing in the pinky toe.
I would still start Antonio Gibson. I don't think Dowdle's role is super or as concrete as what we've seen from Gibson over the last 3 weeks.
DBro, who's your last must-sit running back?
Oh, last guy I'm going to bring up here has got to be a Diontae Foreman. And part of this comes with the muddiness of this backfield. Khalil Herbert might be back. We're not sure what that's going to look like. And if he is back, what does that do to Diontae Foreman? I mean, does Herbert just reassume all the early down stuff and Diontae's sent to the bench? Probably the most likely outcome. But if Herbert's not back, I still don't have a lot of love for Diontae Foreman. Yes, he's been extremely good, but so has the Detroit Lions run defense. Since week 5, 6th lowest explosive run rate, 6th lowest yards after contact per attempt allowed. Diontae Foreman's had some plus matchups, or at least middle of the road matchups, to where he can rack up that volume. I think that entire game could be a shootout, but even if it is a shootout, I don't think Diontae Foreman is coming along for the ride.
You mentioned Herbert coming back, Fields coming back as well. Do you think that'll take away carries from the running backs?
I think it's going to take away carries from Foreman, as well as, look, we've seen the Detroit Lions every single week just put up points, dude. So if Chicago looks up at the scoreboard and says 14-0, and we're 2 minutes into the game, it's not good. Not good at all. Then it's going to be the Justin Fields show, and we're going to see him air the ball out. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of not Diontae Foreman this week.
Let's step into the Who Do I Start tool. This is free to use at fantasypros.com/start. Anybody can head there and put in their own starter sit questions, up to 4 different players at a time. You can even pick and choose from which experts your decision draws. We will do some right here. Erickson, Najee Harris, or Brian Robinson this week?
I'm lower on consensus on Brian Robinson, but again, if I have him, I'm playing him against the Giants. Like, it's too good of a matchup, even though I know that he wasn't great against the Giants the first time around. They did have Leonard Williams at that point. They don't have Leonard Williams anymore. So, again, I think Brian Robinson, again, he's someone that I'm kind of worried about just because the Commanders throw the ball so much and they don't really run it. So that does concern me, but I think you got to still play him.
How about 2 of your players that you have as must-sits, James Cook or Najee Harris?
First, Brian Robinson.
Either, or versus each other.
I mean, I would start Brian Robinson over all those guys.
What about Cook versus Harris?
Cook, 1 spot ahead. Yeah. It's like,
so it's close, but
they're just gross running backs, to be honest. Like, I would rather, look, he's playing tonight, but I'd rather start Keaton Mitchell over all those guys.
Mm-hmm.
Oof. All right.
How about Antonio Gibson or Chuba Hubbard?
Have them back to back. Probably would start Hubbard.
All right, DBro, your guys are all back to back to back, so I want to pit all 3 of them against each other. Chuba Hubbard, Darrell Henderson, or Diontae Foreman. Who are you starting?
I want to say none of the above. Give me Diontae out of all those guys, but
So the same thing Erickson brought up. He starts later tonight, but just for the sake of reference point, would you start Keaton Mitchell over any of those three?
I'd start Keaton Mitchell over all of those three.
All right. They are ranked in roughly a similar range in the expert consensus rankings.
Just a way for Worm to just eke in a little more Ravens love.
Erickson is the one who brought up Keaton Mitchell, not me. DBro.
You're Coots. You're Coots.
Last one. Would you start Zach Charbonnet over all three of those guys?
I would start Charbonnet over all three of those guys. I think like we're looking at the workload and even the upside. I do not think that after writing up the primer, Kenneth Walker is anywhere close to healthy. So I think one of these weeks we're going to get the Charbonnet game where everybody's like, oh, he's going to play about 50% of the snaps. And then Kenneth Walker goes out there and tweaks something, whether it's a calf or his chest or something like that. And then we see the Charbonnet game where he gets 80% of the snaps. I think it's coming.
Again, the Who Do I Start tool is free to use at fantasypros.com/start. We'll be using that throughout the show. Let's jump to the must-sit wide receivers. Erickson, who are you starting off with?
I know I talked about DTR and how I think he'll be better, but I still want to look to mitigate risk with a rookie quarterback, so I'm going to sit Amari Cooper. Just look, Amari Cooper is one of these players that every time you like feel confident about sitting him, he like goes off, and then vice versa. When he's like in a really good spot, he just totally bombs. But look, it's too risky for me. I mean, in DTR's second start, again, the first start was really bad for Amari Cooper. He had one catch for 16 yards. So I do expect it to be more than that, even in a good matchup against the Steelers secondary, which has been pretty beatable at times this year. I just, as great Obi-Wan Kenobi once said, this is just not the upside play you're looking for here with Amari Cooper. So I think you can bench him, and I think you can feel pretty safe about it.
We had a very long Star Wars conversation on Slack yesterday with many of the analysts. So we'll save everybody, all the listeners, from having us rehash that. DBro, Amari Cooper, this is a guy that, had looked so much better with Deshaun Watson under center. So, obviously with DTR there, it's just such an unknown. Where do you have him?
Oh, it's not only the DTR stuff. It's also that Joey Porter Jr. is shadowed more than once this season, and Joey Porter Jr. is the truth. Yeah, I said it, man. He's playing out of his mind. He's one of the best young corners in the game. I've got Amari Cooper I've got him buried, man. I've got him as a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 37 right now.
Oh, wow. He's wide receiver 28 in ECR for the record. Wide receiver 4 is pretty low, but again,
I would take shots on give me Jaden Reed. I would start Jaden Reed this week over Amari Cooper. Yeah, and I don't even think that's much of a hot take.
Erickson and Fitz, it looks like both have him more in the mid to late 20s range rather than late 30s, but still not somebody we're aggressively starting. DBro, sticking in that same game, who's your first must-sit wide receiver?
I have got all the bad juju and heebie-jeebies about Diontae Johnson. And just considering what we've seen out of this Pittsburgh Steelers offense, they want to run the ball. And they're running the ball extremely well right now. What does that mean? It boils down to Diontae Johnson. The volume has dried up. It's gone. Last week, we could say, oh, he got a 17.3% target share. And you're like, that's not that bad. Well, when your quarterback throws the ball 23 times, yes, that's very bad. So looking at Diontae Johnson, it's not only the target volume, it's the complexion of this offense, but also we make all the jokes about, Diontae Johnson, can he score touchdowns and stuff? That's also a function of his quarterback as well. If his quarterback is not great at passing touchdowns, because Kenny Pickett is not, he only has one game this season, guys, of multiple passing touchdowns. Across his last four games, one passing touchdown. If the quarterback's not throwing touchdowns, they're not going to anybody, much less Diontae Johnson. So what are we talking about with Diontae on a weekly basis now moving forward? He's what? Garrett Wilson? The uglier version of Garrett Wilson? Basically, we got to lean on volume, but that's probably not going to happen because Pittsburgh wants to run the ball and can run the ball. So Diontae has gone from a volume-dependent wide receiver 2 for me. Now he is a scary as all get out wide receiver 3, where you're like, if he doesn't get a 30+% target share, I'm probably quite upset that I plugged him into my lineup.
He's wide receiver 30, Erickson, in ECR. Is that too high, too low, or just right?
I mean, I think wide receiver 3 territory is fine. I mean, I get that he's coming off a really bad game with only 4 targets, but I mean, that's his lowest targets of the year. Like, it's not very conducive, I think, for him going forward. I mean, he's always been the target leader in this offense. Like, so again, I mean, he's always kind of been a floor play anyway, especially better in PPR than half PPR. And we know the touchdown upside is low for a guy like Diontae, even though he scored a couple weeks ago, but we knew he was going to score at some point. So again, this game is just gross. Steelers Browns, like, just look at the total. Like, it's like historically pacing, like you mentioned, where I'm like with Iowa games from college football, where it's just bad. So again, don't feel any obligation whatsoever to be like, gotta jam in Browns and Steelers this week. It's like, don't do that. Like, if you can avoid them, that's probably the best move to make.
If you fade them, you're probably not going to be
exactly.
hurt.
Like, I don't think they can really hurt you, just based on the lack of juice we're going to see in action in this offense, in this offensive game.
They can't hurt you again, Erickson. Yeah. They can't hurt you again.
Erickson, who's your next must sit?
I'm going to Jordan Addison here. He's taking on the Denver Broncos, who have this new, rejuvenated defense that's come out. They're not getting run over every single week by the Miami Dolphins. They're actually shutting down number 1 options week in and week out. 2 weeks ago, shut down Travis Kelce. Last week on Monday Night Football, they shut down Stephon Diggs. So again, the question is, do they throw everything at TJ Hawkinson or Jordan Addison? So we know Justin Jefferson's not going to play. So that's my one kind of caveat to bring up here. It's like, they could try to just shut down Hawkinson, who's really been Josh Dobbs' guy. But considering how bad they've just been overall against tight ends, I still think Hawkinson's going to get his, and you can't bench Hawkinson. So for me, I would bench Addison. He's been good, not great in the 2 games with Dobbs. Again, you'd expect them to potentially to build chemistry, but Addison's been a wide receiver 3 in both of his games, like finishing in that 30 range. So again, if he's drawing coverage from Surtain, it's just a matchup that I think you can get away with not starting Jordan Addison, who has been okay with Dobbs. I just would probably look for another receiver with more upside.
DBro, I think you also have Addison as a wide receiver 3 this week. Is that right?
I do. Mr. Jordan Addison is at, I've floated him anywhere between wide receiver 25 to into the 30s.
All right, DBro, sticking with you for your next must sit.
Yeah, Adam Thielen. Can we say that the Adam Thielen show is kaput? It has been canceled. It's off the air. It's not great. The last 3 since week 8, wide receiver 24. Okay, that's okay. Wide receiver 42. Wide receiver 35. Oh dear. It's all just gone off the rails, and this all goes back to Bryce Young and the quarterback play. But it's also Dallas secondary we know is extremely talented. Now, out of that, Jordan Lewis has not been playing good football. But even if you wanted to say, okay, they're going to pick on Jordan Lewis, who's allowed a 134 passer rating in his coverage, and they're going to target Thielen, that's also under the assumption that Bryce Young is going to be upright in a lot of this game. That's also the assumption that Bryce Young is going to deliver catchable targets to Adam Thielen in this game. Those are some really big assumptions to make right now, considering what we've seen out of this offense over the last few weeks and how we've seen the Dallas Cowboys just put their foot on the opponent's throats and say, you're not doing anything this week. Like, when those games have gone sideways, they have gone massively sideways. So Adam Thielen, I haven't been with consensus and ranking him as like a top 12, top 15 wide receiver. I'm like, no, the matchups say that he's probably not going to be that, and we've seen the results follow suit. So I'm just going to keep on ranking him as a wide receiver 3 because that's about where he needs to be weekly moving forward.
What do you think about Frank Reich taking back over play calling duties in Carolina?
Matter.
Doesn't
matter.
impact it at all. He performed better in
is Frank
fantasy.
Reich going to run out there and we're going to run routes?
Well,
is he going to get
I think
open?
It does matter.
Outside of that,
I think it does matter. I mean,
No.
there's a pretty clear correlation between he stopped calling plays the last 3 weeks, Adam Thielen, bad number. Like, I think there's a clear core. I agree with Worm. I think that it does matter that Frank Reich's calling plays again, and I think that's good
Frank
for Thielen.
Reich is the one running the routes for Adam Thielen. He's the one that says, okay, Adam Thielen can get open or
He's
not.
the one that dials up where the ball goes.
The ball.
Especially with Dallas. You know
That's
Dallas.
also a
Dallas
function of him getting open.
Dallas plays more man coverage. That's where Thielen's been better this year against man coverage. And look at Bryce Young.
That's fair.
He's been way better. He can't do anything against zone, but Bryce Young has been way better against man coverage. So again, I agree with you. I've been fading Thielen. I keep getting the notifications like, you are this much spots lower than consensus on Adam Thielen.
Every time.
And I was like, yeah, I know. This week though, I think I'm more with consensus. Obviously it's adjusted, putting him like in the 20s, but no, I think that he's kind of like a sneaky start on it. So I honestly disagree.
I'm definitely going to have our boy Ethan clip off the section where Erickson said, I agree with Worm, because that's pretty rare and it's music to my ears. Erickson, who's your last must-sit wide receiver?
Christian Watson. I think like Fetch is just not going to, I just don't think it's going to happen with Jordan Love. Like they don't have chemistry. And I don't know how many air yards we need to see from Christian Watson to Jordan Love, like just not connect till we realize that I think Jordan Love, again, he's trying to like earn the job and be the Green Bay Packers starting quarterback. I think he's starting to realize like, dude, if I keep throwing to Christian Watson, like I'm going to get benched or something. Like it's not good. Whereas, DBro brought him up, but Jaden Reed, it's like when he throws the ball to Jaden Reed, good things are happening. When he throws the ball to Luke Musgrave, good things are happening. When he throws the ball to Romeo Doubs, good things are happening. Not the case with Christian Watson. So I know Watson has got the targets and he's running the most routes, but it's not coming to fruition when it comes to actual production. Jaden Reed the last 3 weeks leads the team not in targets, but in catchable targets. So what actually matters in terms of actual production? So again, we usually like to chase targets. He had 7 targets last week, but even in a good matchup, he wasn't able to get it done. It's a good matchup again this week, but I think we're just going to see more of the other Packers players because I think Jordan Love is just going to distribute the ball like he has done most of the season. It's going to be flat target share, but I think he's going to try to favor some of these other guys who have just been flat out better than Christian Watson at producing. So for that reason, I'm going to be benching Christian Watson even in a good matchup.
DBro, you were like the Christian Watson guy during the offseason. You're still higher than consensus. You have him as a late wide receiver 3, I think. So maybe even early wide receiver 4. So that's not like you're that crazy aggressive or anything. You are still higher than consensus, though. Why are you still somewhat buying into Watson?
Target share has been there, and this is not a Watson problem. This is a Love problem. And the other thing about this is Christian Watson, during the time where he's been a full-time wide receiver, take lopping off the first week when he came back, played part-time snaps. He's had 8 end zone targets and has 0 touchdowns with them. That regression has to hit there. So I don't know if it hits this week. I'm making the bet that it does because the Chargers can't stop anybody through the air. So again, Erickson is lower on Adam Thielen. I'm going to fight for my man.
Would you start Reed or Christian Watson?
I'm starting Watson. I actually like both. The conundrum when I was looking at that game, I was like, somebody's walking away from this game with a big game this week against the Chargers. Who's it going to be?
That's the thing with the Packers every single week because everybody gets 4 targets.
Yeah, it's fair.
Romeo
Doubs, pick your flavor. Somebody's going to have a good game.
DBro, who's your last must-sit receiver?
Oh, last guy I'm going to bring up here, it's got to be Jakobi Meyers. And again, we talk about the target volume helium just being eked out of the balloon. It's absolutely happened. Aiden O'Connell in this Raiders offense, they want to run. And Tony Pierce has come out and said it. We're going to be a run-first team. We're going to run the ball. We're going to run the ball. We're going to run the ball. Okay, unless your name is Devontae Adams, that means no targets for anybody else. With Aiden O'Connell under center, Jakobi Meyers, 13.5% target share. 15.8% first read share. It's not been pretty. And then when you look at the matchup also going against Miami, the tandem of Xavier Howard and Jalen Ramsey, Jalen Ramsey just hopped straight up out the gym, got out of rehab, and was like, I'm going to go right back to being an all-pro corner. Let's go, baby. I want no part of this. You got to sit Jakobi Meyers.
Let's move to our Who Do I Start section here for the wide receivers. Erickson, Amari Cooper, or Cortland Sutton this week?
Cortland Sutton.
How about Jordan Addison or Calvin Ridley?
I guess I'll just start Calvin Ridley and just pray.
Okay. How about Christian Watson or Jackson Smith and Jigba?
I think in this one I would probably start Christian Watson.
Well, Tyler Lockett's banged up too, so the caveat there.
Well, Lockett's been banged up every single week, and he still plays.
But he actually missed practice this week.
He's always on me because he's old. He's injury. He's always on there because he's old. I think that Yeah, I would probably just start Watson. Like, again, the matchup is good against the Chargers. They just can't stop anybody. And, the Rams with JSN, like, he still really hasn't, taken over this target share we were hoping with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett still. Obviously, if Lockett misses the game, then you're going to start JSN. But I would, again, pray with Christian Watson and hope that he finally converts some of these end zone targets into a touchdown.
DBro, Diontae Johnson or Nico Collins?
If he plays Nico, because I don't know if Robert Woods or Noah Brown play in this game, so I'm going easy Nico.
How about Adam Thielen or Terry McLaurin?
It's Terry. Let's go Terry.
Jakobi Meyers or Jerry Jeudy?
Oh, God, that's so disgusting.
I think I gotta go Jakobi, man.
Good Lord.
At least Jacoby's been good at points this year.
Oh, my God. That's terrible. I would go Jakobi Meyers. I have no faith in Jerry Jeudy anymore.
Now with game manager Russ at quarterback.
Yeah.
Man, it's rough.
All right, let's get to our must-sit quarterbacks, tight ends, and defenses. Erickson, who you got at QB, TE, and DST?
I'm going to sit Trevor Lawrence, who's averaging fewer fantasy points per game than Deshaun Watson and Will Levis this season. He's 2 top 10 finishes, has not finished better than QB 8 at any point this year. I get that the Titans are this pass funnel defense, but they're not giving up a lot of fantasy points, even though they're giving up a lot of passing attempts. So Tennessee has not allowed 20 fantasy points to a quarterback since week 3, Deshaun Watson. So I'm going to sit Trevor Lawrence because he can't score fantasy points. I'm going to sit Cade Otton because the Titans are a brutal matchup for tight ends. Second fewest fantasy points allowed to the tight end position. So for me, I'm going to sit Cade Otton. And then Packers, DST. They've one top 10 finish since week 2. So I don't want to play them against the Chargers. And actually, I want to correct something I said. So Cade Otton is not playing the Titans. That is incorrect because the Jaguars are playing the Titans. The Buccaneers, guys, help me out here. Who are the Buccaneers playing again?
San Francisco.
49ers,
49ers are very good against
Titans. Still a really bad matchup.
I knew in my notes, I was like, okay, they're not playing. I had Titans on my mind, but I was like, I know it's a bad matchup.
Yeah, that's last week. That's last week, baby. We're on
Cade
this
Otton
one.
to sit him, whether he's playing the Titans or he's playing the 49ers, don't care, on the bench.
Just look. Just copy the analysis and move it over. It's still good, Erickson. It's still good and it's still fresh.
Erickson, I'm curious if you can give me some names that might surprise people that you're starting over Lawrence, but I also want to ask you, where do you have Lawrence rest of season? Because this is like become the second half of last year is starting to look really strongly like the outlier so far. And it's not like any of us are doubting the talent of Trevor Lawrence at this point yet, but like, I don't think he can be a QB1 in rest of season rankings at this point. And he's not in the expert ones. He's QB 13, so he's just on the cusp of it, but he has dropped.
That's still too
to
high.
QB 13. Where do you have him, Erickson?
In the rest of the season ranking, I think I have him like outside the top 15. I mean, look, like the thing with Lawrence is like, yeah, he's probably a better real life quarterback than fantasy quarterback. Like he's just not, he wasn't a good fantasy quarterback last year. And I kept trying to point out to people, I was like, why are we driving this guy in like the 7th round when he hasn't shown that he can score actual fantasy points? And that's all we've seen this year. Obviously, adding Calvin Ridley hasn't worked out in terms of turning into actual fantasy production. Like Travis Etienne has been the guy that's scoring all the fantasy points in this offense. And that's what's made this offense work and click when the Jaguars have been winning games. So for me, yeah, it's like Lawrence is just doesn't offer a lot as a rusher. And he hasn't really clicked with his new weapons where you're seeing him throw for 300 yards and 3 passing touchdowns. Like, has he done that at all this year? Like, does he have one game where he has like 300 yards and 3 touchdowns? Like, I don't know. I would be skeptical to look at that. So,
I know for a fact off the top of my head, 2 of his 3 QB1 games have both come against Indy. So if he's not playing Indy, you're pretty good to fade Lawrence.
I've got his game log up. He's only thrown for 300 yards once this season. And he has not thrown for 3 touchdowns in any game this season. He's only thrown for 2 touchdowns in a game twice.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that's sad. He still needs that actual wide receiver 1 to really take that next step from a fantasy perspective. Ridley obviously hasn't been that guy since, again, if he's not playing the Colts, basically. So, yeah, I mean, I think that you can just fade Trevor Lawrence. I think he's like more of a streaming quarterback. Like this week, I'd rather play Jordan Love. Jordan Love is like the opposite. Like Jordan Love is not a good real life quarterback, but he scores fantasy points. So it's a bizarro type of analysis there.
Can we get in the Wayback Machine for a second and realize if somebody were to have told us in August, or if we would have said it in August, I would much rather handedly play Josh Dobbs over Trevor Lawrence, people would have said, "No, you need your head examined."
They'd be like,
That's
"Who's
the
Josh
NFL,
Dobbs?"
man. Yeah. That's fantasy every year, though. You get those crazy look back stories. We got to move it along. DBro, who's your quarterback, tight end, and defense that you're sitting?
Well, unfortunately for all the Will Levis stands, he's not playing Atlanta again for the rest of the season. So I said to pump the brakes when the miraculous game happened, and now you're seeing why. Over the last 2 weeks amongst 34 qualifying quarterbacks, Will Levis has stunk. So 7th lowest yards per attempt, 6th lowest passer rating. Any of these sound great? No. 2nd lowest highly accurate throw rate. So he's not even delivering accurate balls to his receivers. So you have to sit Will Levis, as well as the Jacksonville Jaguars have been an improved pass defense. And speaking of the Jacksonville Jaguars, Evan Ingram, I'm going to tell you to sit him this week. And this comes down to all of the matchup. Erickson, yes, the Jacksonville Jaguars are playing the Tennessee Titans this week.
Confirmed.
So confirmed. Tennessee is the only team in the NFL yet to allow a receiving touchdown to tight ends. None. Nada. Zilch. Poof. Goose egg. Evan Ingram has been doing all these different things on volume and stuff, but also Tennessee has been pretty good at limiting volume. 7th lowest receiving yards per game allowed to tight end. So if he's not getting there in the volume, he's not going to get a touchdown because he's not getting red zone usage, and Tennessee's not giving up touchdowns. So sit Evan Ingram. And the last of the defense I'm going to bring up here is Seattle. I think the Rams could have a big game this week, but also we have seen with Seattle, they have the 12th highest rate of offensive drives ending in a turnover, and they are also near the top 12 in quarterback knockdown. So if Stafford comes out and he looks a little bit rusty this week, we get a pick, we get a few sacks, things like that. That's how we score fantasy points with these defenses. So I'm willing to make that bet because at this point of the season, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to find defenses.
Evan Ingram or Dalton Schultz this week?
Schultz. Easy Schultz.
All right, we'll wrap up the show with that one. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you to Erickson and DBro for joining. As always, like we do every Thursday morning, for those guys, I am Ryan Wormeli. We'll see you again next time.